Okay, my name is Lawrence Woodward from Whole Health Agriculture, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us in what I maintain is the most important session of the conference, because we're talking about how to manage health. In fact, how to make health infectious and how that can be done from farming right through to the table to fork. Now, there are some technical stuff that we need to cover, and as I think the word is TC, technically challenged, I'm going to ask my colleague Jackie Pearce-Dickens to run through what needs to happen in terms of the nitty-gritty management of this session. Jackie, if you do that, please.
Okay, hi. Thanks, Lawrence. Yeah, so what we're going to try and do throughout the session is I'm going to be sharing my screen at certain times to show presentations, and then the other presenters are going to be doing the same. With questions, we thought it would be a good idea that if people could either use the chat below, or they could raise their hand, and Sarah will be running through that with you. Or if you wanted to, you could just turn your videos on and wave wildly. So we thought it might be a bit easier than just using just the chat. So I'm going to hand you back to Lawrence now. Lawrence is the chair of Whole Health Agriculture.
Thank you. So the title of this session is Managing Health from Farm to Fork. And we are approaching this by asking two well-established, successful farmers from Wales to describe their system and what they do, how they approach the issue of managing for health, what their systems are about, and how they do the kind of practical management, and any observations that they may have on the concepts. Because then, you know, farmers produce stuff, but basically it then goes into a food system and a food chain. And there's vastly different ideas as to what food quality is and to what how food quality impacts on health. So we have two people from the health professional side to give their observations on this. The first one will relate to this from a nutritional perspective and from the idea of functional medicine. That's Dr. Sally Bell, and then Dr. Peter Mansfield, who's had a long-term experience in whole approach to holistic health and the links between food, health management, family health, community health, will introduce what may for some people be a very new insights, but I think his insights speak really to the whole essence of how we make health infectious. We're going to kick off with Sally Woods, who with her partner Jerry farm in Pembrokeshire. They began to question the use of artificial fertilizers, the use of antibiotics and chemicals and wormers and so on a long time ago. Started while still conventional farmers using homeopathy, and through the use of homeopathy came to different insights about health and a holistic approach. They began then the process of conversion to organic agriculture, and have latterly joined Pasture Fed Livestock Association. We're going to start with a small film, a little clip from a larger film that Whole Health Agriculture has done about their farming systems. So we're going to kick off with that, and then Sally and Gary will join us on the panel discussion. So, Jackie, if you could put the screen on, please, the video on.
Total hectareage then is about 106 hectares. Got 150 milking cows at present, 50 odd in-calf heifers due to calve in the spring, and quite a lot of younger stock then.
We've always wanted to be organic, but never felt that the farm was got depth of soil enough. But seeing there was another farm across the valley had done it and was fairly successful, weren't they?
Yeah.
We decided we hadn't got an excuse.
Well, basically, we could start to control our own destiny and inputs then, because we weren't at the mercy of merchants and fertilizer prices and feed prices and things like that then. So it's basically we're trying to almost become completely self-sufficient in the way that we farm now. So yeah, it's basically sort of taking control then, not chasing our tails all the time, in the fact that getting bigger and bigger, and you know, we want to produce a quality product and get a better price for it then.
We've gone corn free because we've
grain and soya
free because I feel glyphosate is the big no-no in this world. I think that's the thing that's made things go really wrong after reading Kate Birch's book on it. And I mean, it got to me before that, but then reading about it, it just all went into place. And yes, so we stopped feeding grain then, didn't we? So that, yeah.
Well, and also the soya is usually coming from South America and places like that. So it's, as far as you feel that you're producing locally produced food, but you're feeding soya that comes from Brazil. Yeah. So it's sort of, it's a bit contradictory, really. Yeah. But yeah.
I suppose it's well, we've learnt that we've got to get the soil right, to get the plants right, to get the animals right, to get us right. So it's just starting from the bottom and working up. So that's what we're trying to do. We're thoroughly enjoying the soil, aren't we? Learning about the soil and trying to get that as healthy as we can, so everything else follows healthy then.
So
we've got dung beetles, they're gorgeous. Love my dung beetles. Yeah, and loads of them. They're like little drones coming in.
Our milk is very high in solids then, so it's very high in fat and protein. So we supply Callen, which is a cooperative then, organic cooperative that make a range of products, but we also supply Tavy Cheese then, who he started off only buying milk from us to make organic halloumi, but he now makes all his cheese using our milk then. A previous farmer used to take milk from me, needed just over 10 litres to make 1 kilogram of cheese. So when he takes our milk then he needs just under 7 litres then to make a kilogram of cheese. So he doesn't buy so much milk, is the only trouble.
Yes. There's nothing's black and white in farming, is it? So it's very difficult. But yeah, no, let's put it this way: we're making a profit. We're paying taxes. That's a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah. I
hate paying taxes, but so I always think, well, if you're paying taxes, you're making money. So yeah, no, that's it. We are, aren't we? Doing all right. Funnily enough.
Yeah. You don't like to say it, but.
Yeah. Don't like to brag, but yeah, doing all right. That's what. We use good bugs in the water to clean the water troughs, don't we? Mm. And all the water pipes, and I think that is a good place to start.
We're using a lot more herbs, putting herbal lays in and trying to bring up minerals and things from deeper down within the soils, then that's it. I think you're trying to get the cow to be more healthy, so she can do the work herself then, rather than us having to do it. So
we use kefir for the calves as well, with the milk, which I think has, well, I think it's made them a lot healthier. Somehow, we're a big believer in that, aren't we?
yeah. And we always try and put the apple cider vinegar and things into the drinking water for the cows, in whichever paddock they're going into, so they're getting the benefits of that as well. And we're trying to get into putting the tissue salts into the water.
It's all linked, isn't it? And
yeah,
there's not, I mean, homeopathy is a big thing for us. I think that's made the biggest difference, perhaps in a way, for the health. Respect them.
Yes, yeah, respect them, yeah. They're the ones paying the bills, not us. So
You've got to look after them. And I think that is the weird thing, is they know when you're not happy, I think. And if we're in a bad mood, they're in a bad mood, I would say. Wouldn't you?
yeah.
So, no arguments in the parlour. I think the exciting thing about going organic is that it's taken the blinkers off, and your mind is open to so many different things, and things just keep coming along that are going to enhance the farm, I think.
But not that you need to be organic to use
No.
holistic approaches, but I think it just definitely helps. It's like the full picture then, isn't it, rather than just taking a piece and using it. So
it's joining the dots, I always put it as. It's all linked, isn't it? And
yeah,
you need it all linked. You need it's all linked, because you've got to have everything, haven't you?
So, I love Sally's little asides there. She didn't link them together, but I think the observation that the farm's teeming with dung beetles and now they're paying taxes is a kind of interesting thing to explore in terms of holistic thinking and interconnectedness. I'm not sure many farmers would like to go down that thing, but I think the connection is very interesting. The next presentation is from Anne Evans, and Anne is truly one of the pioneers of the organic movement and has inspired many growers along with her partner Peter Seger over the years. Anne's lived and worked in Blaencamel Farm in the Aeron Valley for 40 years, and they've been growing organic vegetables and selling organic vegetables in a range of outlets since then. And Anne did go through a period of running the farm herself while Peter was away being an international guru and celebrity, and actually, in fairness, trying to develop a whole ethical supply chains internationally. But latterly, Anne's concentrated on the farm's greenhouse production and plant raising. And as I said, they've got experience of all types of organic marketing, from supermarkets to farmers markets, and now since the COVID restrictions, online markets. So I've asked Anne we came up with the title of The Building Blocks of Growing Health, 40 years of organic growing in the Aeron Valley. But basically, I've asked Anne to explain what they're doing at Blaencamel, what their basic system is, and how the crops are grown, and how the system works on the ground.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to just say I wish I had a film like Gary and Sally had, and how many of the things we do are directly comparable to what they do, even though we're dealing with, I don't know, lettuces and they're dealing with cows. As Lawrence said, we are based in the Aeron Valley, 6 miles from the coast at Cardigan Bay. We're producing vegetables all year round from 1.5 acres of greenhouses and also about more or less 12 acres of field vegetables. Our greenhouse production was expanded greatly about 10 years ago when we began to plan for climate change. So now that we've got these greenhouses, they help us to extend the growing season and we're able to grow year round. The fertility for growing the crops is based on 2 features. First of all, rotation. In our case, grass clover and red clover lays for about 3 years, and then vegetables for about 3 years. And within those 3 years, then the vegetable crops rotate also. We don't actually have sheep anymore, so the management of these grass and clover lays is going to be quite different. And we're on a new learning curve with that. The second feature, the second thing on which the fertility of farms based is compost. And for 20 years now or more, we've been making controlled microbial compost. It's a system, it's an aerobic system. It uses windrows, covers, and we have a turner. And we're looking for a certain carbon nitrogen balance in the compost we make, which is suitable for horticultural crops. The ingredients for our compost are vegetable waste, crop residues, the cut clover, wood chip, because we've got extensive hedgerows here, and so with the hedge management we get a lot of wood chip. Historically, we used to use the wool from our sheep, and we also import a small amount of stable manure, which is important as well. So rotation and compost are the foundation of the farm's health. The compost feeds the soil, but not in a direct NPK type of way. It's more that the compost provides an inoculation of microorganisms, which once in the soil can breed up. But this does then stress the need to have very good quality compost if you're going to be expanding what you've just put into it. We don't know what all the microorganisms are that we're putting into the soil. So it seems to us the safest thing is to put in the more the better. All the microorganisms have a function, and we're only just beginning to learn what the function is, but they work together to feed an environment which protects health. And for some years now, we've been quite sure that this is analogous to the human gut biome, with microorganisms at work there. The health of the crops we grow is based on the farm's health. So all the time, what we're aiming for is vitality in the crops. At my most basic level, what I'm looking for is plants with a really good plant structure, an intense flavor, and vibrant colors. So we have to say, do these come from variety or do they come from farming system? And unfortunately, I suppose we have to say it's not clear. We grow a wide range of crops, more than 50. And within any single crop could be several varieties. We include both open pollinated and heirloom varieties within what we grow. And these are probably good for vitality in their own right. But they're not always commercially brilliant. Some, though, are so flavoursome that they're worth the effort. For example, some of the tomatoes, like a black Russian tomato, we have to work quite hard with to get them to grow in the way that our other tomatoes grow. But they have an incredible flavour, so we persevere. But others of the crops we grow are hybrids. These give us commercial reliability. in terms of timing of crop, predictability, yield. And of course, if you're going to work professionally as a grower, you have to know these things. You can't have completely erratic production. But we do note, though, that even when we grow a hybrid crop, our growing system seems to add vitality to those varieties. We notice that customers who will rave about something we've grown, the first thing they will always ask is, what's the variety? As though this is the answer to it all. But if I can give you an example, strawberries, we get huge compliments for our strawberries. But until recently, the variety we grew was El Santo, which is, well, not to be too rude about it, but it's a bog standard variety, but produced from our greenhouses, as opposed to coming in from somewhere abroad. They have a huge reputation locally for flavour. Another example would be our carrots, which are a glowing orange colour and have a very intense flavour. But they are grown from a conventional seed, and you may well ask me, what on earth are we doing growing conventional seed carrots? But it's because of the wet conditions we have locally. I mean, it's here pouring with rain and has been almost non-stop. And we've had historically some quite bad crop failures, which we can't really afford to do. So we grow a conventional variety, but we definitely get an improvement, more than an improvement, in flavour. So we would say that variety can definitely influence flavour, but we don't think it determines it. What we're talking about, of course, are flavonoids and carotenoids. And I'm no expert on this, and we have got experts here, and I'm sure this will get mentioned. But it is something which intuitively, as growers, it's something we're looking at. As a bit of a side note, we also grow a few flowers, and it's noticeable with them also that we get a vibrancy of colour and a depth of fragrance that, well, I know you don't eat, well, you mustn't eat sweet peas, they're poisonous, but it seems to be an indication that there is something in the system that is lending very special qualities to the crops. As well as the more normal varieties of vegetables, we grow some unusual varieties too, partly because we get bored, but we also like to search out experimental crops to try for the first time, based on our travels or reading, or chefs will ask us to try to do something, and even customers will ask us to have a go. Recent example have been new types of, not new, alternative varieties of heirloom tomatoes. We're always looking for something to put in our heirloom mix. And we have found a breeder in California, a retired hippie, I think, who's come up with the most amazing types of tomatoes we can try. Also, we find that the greenhouses early in the season provide a very good environment for trying to grow vegetables that are more at home in Mediterranean areas. And so we've been able to grow for quite a few years now, agretti or salsola, and also some of the bitter dandelion leaf type chicories, which, interestingly enough, our customers love early in the year. It seems to be that there's a craving for particular flavours straight in the middle of winter. We've also tried Japanese turnips. These are so different from British turnips. They're completely remarkable, but they were recommended by an Australian master chef who Peter met. And we've also grown red carrots. These were requested by a Pakistani customer of ours who lives in Swansea, who said she so missed red carrots because that's what's traditionally grown in Pakistan. Well, blow me, there they were with their vibrant colour and their deep flavour. Quite a discovery. Moving on to harvest, this introduces another aspect of growing for health. And intuitively, we've always taken note of the time and method of harvest, and also speed of distribution, which now, because of a complete change really in our marketing, we have a very, very short chain of distribution, which can only be to the good with food quality. And various studies have in fact shown that good compost promotes post-harvest quality. Early crystallization studies, some of the photographs, seem to support this idea. And we, or at least our crops, certainly have a good reputation for shelf life. So in conclusion, obviously one has to support the government message of people eating more than 5 portions of vegetables a day. But clearly this is a very basic first step. And you can't really stop there, because if we're looking at the whole food chain, it's going to be the way that the 5+ vegetables are produced that is almost as important as eating them. Well, no, it must be important to eat some vegetables, but there is this huge question of how they are grown. But how to promote this idea of the way vegetables are grown is, I think, going to be quite a problem. And I finished.
Thank you, Anne. That was brilliant. It's very illuminating, very, very interesting.
I wish I had pictures for you.
Well, maybe I should have said that. But anyway, no, it was superb. You painted the picture with your words. It was great, and it was interesting. You drew the similarities or the some threads with what Sally and Gary had said.
Oh, really clear, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. One thing that I know is because when I first visited Blaencamel, people used to say you cannot grow vegetables like this in Wales. 40 years on, it's just stunning what you've done. And I noticed Sally said, you know, they were reluctant to go organic because of the soil and you know, and how difficult that might be. I mean, the lesson clearly from your experience is actually you can grow quality, vibrant, vital vegetables wherever, so long as you get the systems right. So thank you, it was excellent. Lots of things to pick up in the discussion, and just to remind people, please put questions in the chat as we move forward. Dr. Sally Bell is a trained NHS GP and a practitioner in functional medicine. I think we'll be posting the link to her website. Sally, on there you'll see that Sally believes in a whole food approach based on well-sourced ingredients as a key foundation of good health. And so I asked her, if food is medicine, what does she mean by well-sourced ingredients, and what thoughts does she have about the whole nutritional link and things concerning, you know, the claims about nutrition and nutrient density and so on. How does all that work? So Sally, please, would you tell us, would you let us have your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. I so wish I lived near you, Anne. Gosh, your produce sounds amazing, and I wish I had access to that locally. Yeah, I'm Dr. Sally, founder of Dr. Sally Bell, and I've been a medical doctor for 21 years, practicing as a GP. And I thought, just before I answer Lawrence's question, I just want to put into context why nutrition is important. I know I'm probably preaching to the converted here, but I think it needs to be spoken within context of illness. Certainly a few years ago, I just got really sick of treating disease instead of people. I got tired of suppressing symptoms instead of getting to the root cause of why people were unwell, tired of looking at a part of you instead of treating the whole of you, and treating you outside of the context of your family, community and culture. And I started practicing a style of medicine that really looked at tapping into how we're genetically wired, and created a kind of system where we created a lifestyle that would help people reverse disease. And the reason that I see this working time and time again now is that as a nation, we are crippled by chronic diseases, everything from autism, mental health, a cancer rate of 1 in 2. We've got issues with heart disease. We're the fattest nation in Europe. We have obesity issues. And when you look at the genetics, like 10% of these diseases are due to our genetics. but 90% are to do with our epigenetics and to do with the lifestyle decisions that we're making every day. And I use a framework and that looks at 5 foundations that underpin health. And I look at sleep, movement, nutrition, rest, so that's really talking about stress, and connection to self, connection to others, and connection to that sense of purpose. And so before we dive into the nutrition piece, we need to understand about this within that context, because I have people coming to me on really, really excellent diets who are very, very ill. And it's often, most of the time, because they are so stressed about what they should or shouldn't be eating, that it's undoing all the wonderful work of the amazing nutrients that the amazing diet that they're eating. So I just want to set that within the context. And again, like Lawrence really pushed me when I had a chat with him last night. I'm filling in last minute, by the way. But he wanted to really get to the nitty gritty. But again, I just think the overarching message when we are talking to the general population about nutrition, because it's very confusing when you start looking, and there's a lot of nutritional wars out there. And I think the overarching message for us as a nation is that we need to get off highly processed food that doesn't look like what it is originally grown as, and we need to get back to a whole food diet. 50% of our diet in the UK comes from highly processed food, compared to something like 10% in Portugal. And so before we go into whether it should be vegan or paleo or whatever else, whatever tribe you want to associate with, I think the big thing here is helping people understand that actually we need to get back to real food. We need to bring people back to the table. We need to remember that food is more than nutrition. It is a thing that gathers us as families. It's a way of celebrating. It's a way of bringing our communities together. And we need to reclaim the table, so to speak. And I think, so when I'm taking people on this journey, you need to understand that most of my colleagues don't even understand anything about nutrition. We don't get trained as GPs and as doctors at all. And I have a time convincing my medical friends that nutrition is important, as well as my patients. But I get to them to a point where I'm talking about whole food and they get it. Then I take them on this journey of talking about nutrient density and getting nutrient dense foods into their diet. We are the fattest nation in Europe, and yet we are malnourished because the food that we're eating just has calories, but it doesn't have the nutrients our bodies need to keep us cancer free, to keep us infection free. So I take them on this journey of thinking about nutrient density, meat being one of the most nutrient dense foods on the planet, and offal being again one of those really nutrient dense foods, chocolate being really nutrient dense, and talking about a lot of plant slant and eating the rainbow. And it's at that point then I start talking about actually where our foods come from. And you have to take people on a journey when we're thinking about this. And then when it comes to like, what do I want? What would I feed my kids? And what is it about the food that I want to get into my children and into my patients? It is all about our soil, isn't it? And our soil microbiome and the impact that that's having on the nutrient density of our food and our own microbiome. But I just wrote a few points here when I'm thinking about what else I want from you as farmers. And I think the thing is, it's got to taste great, hasn't it? Regardless, that has to be number one. But number two, it is all about diversity. Like we have, we were created to eat a very, very diverse diet. Our gut microbiome, which are those trillions of bacteria that help keep us healthy, they like diversity. And so we need more varieties. We need more access to a diverse diet. I would say after that, yes, low chemical input. I think, was it Sally mentioned about glyphosates? These chemicals are there to kill bacteria and viruses and fungi. And as I've just said, like, we have trillions of bacteria and fungi and viruses within our gut bacteria, and we don't want those chemicals killing that and impacting our gut microbiome, which in turn impacts our own health. So low chemical input is really important to me. And And then also thinking, we know now that the evidence shows that these chemicals are also disrupting our hormones. They're obesogenic, they're driving diabetes, driving obesity, driving our cancers. I want access to local produce, again, because we know that the moment that you pick those vegetables, for the time that comes on my plate, those nutrients are degrading. So I want access to local produce. I want you to be thinking about when you're picking your vegetables, because we know that in those days and weeks when you'll know this more than me, you're ripening those fruit and vegetables, all those wonderful phytonutrients, those phytochemicals that are so important in keeping us healthy and keeping our gut bacteria healthy, are produced in those last few days when you're ripening. And if you spray it, then you completely stop that process altogether, robbing me and robbing my children and my patients the ability to be exposed to these wonderful phytonutrients. When it comes to animals, I want them fed their natural diet. I want to know that there's not stuff in that soil and in their grass that's contaminating them, because we know that these chemicals and antibiotics are stored in their fats or their liver. And I want people eating the whole carcass because of all the different vitamins, proteins, fats that I want people exposed to in order to keep them disease-free. We've spoken and touched on dairy. It's so important about what you're feeding and what you're putting in that cow, because it's concentrated within that milk. And then I'd also say I do want access to whole carcass as well. I don't want all those nice even fillet steaks. I want to have access to everything because of the different nutrients in those different cuts that can help reverse disease and keep us healthy. And then finally, I would just want to say that as a medic and as I trying to pull my patients into this way of thinking, I want them to have access to farmers. I want to know my farmer. And I don't have time to wait for institutions to change and labels to change, and because we know that the research takes in medicine, it takes up to 18 years for the research to get into clinical practice, and I don't have time to that. So I want to be able to ask my farmer. I want my farmers to tell me what I should be asking, and learning about what they're doing with their soil. We're learning about what they're doing and feeding their animals, learning about how that's impacting the health of the animal, the health of the vegetables and the fruit. So yes, so that's what that's what I'm looking for when I'm thinking about food and impacting health and reversing disease. I'm taking people on that journey within the context of those other foundations, making the journey to real food, then going further upstream and making that connection between soil health, low chemical input, how you're growing things, slow growing things, and the impact that that's having on our health. So Lawrence, I hope that helps.
Sally, that's great. And I should have said before, and let me stress that we hadn't discussed this. We talked only last night, and you put this together since my rather incoherent conversation with you yesterday. So I think you've done a brilliant job, and thank you very much for doing that and for stepping in. It's interesting, you talked about consumer education and what the farmer knows, what the farmer wants from the consumer and so on. And I hope that we'll pick that up in a second. You also made the point that eating food is about more than nutrition, and you highlighted the family aspects, the community aspects, the social aspects. But our next speaker would also say that's true, that food is more than just the nutrition, and he's going to expand on that. Dr. Peter Mansfield is another on this program of pioneers, and I first met Peter when we were both on the Soil Association Council. Has to be, I don't know, 35 years ago, certainly 30 years ago.
70s.
Yeah. And Anne's partner, Peter Seger, was also involved with the Soil Association at the time. So this is a bit of a kind of oldies gathering. But without question, Peter Mansfield has been at the forefront of the developments of the idea of genuine, true holistic health and what it means in terms of family practice. He trained, studied natural sciences and medicine at Cambridge, then at the UCH Medical School in London, and he gave up this promising academic career in medicine to become a GP, because that's at the cutting edge, that's at the forefront. Not only did he become a GP, he became a GP in an approach which is truly groundbreaking and innovative, based on the traditions of the famous Peckham experiment. So I asked Peter to speak to the idea of realizing health with the title of Vitality, Immunity and Integrity. I think he's got some slides that Jackie is going to help him with, but thank you very much for joining us, Peter.
You're most welcome. Exactly 50 years ago, I was blessed with a sort of Damascus Road experience, a vivid insight of what health is. I'd spent all of the time since teasing out its ramifications and trying to cultivate health around me. My wife and I set up a family doctor practice in rural Lincolnshire, where we fed ourselves and our children from livestock and garden crops grown on our organic smallholding, registered with the Soil Association. We enjoyed very clean air because of where we were, and for the last 30 years have purified our drinking water by reverse osmosis. Now, I'm telling you this because it is how I account for the excellent health so far of myself and my immediate family. Neither Pamela nor I have consulted a doctor about disease for decades. At 77, I can still work a hard manual day on our local organic farm or vineyard, walk fast and long, and split logs for hours. This way of living infected our practice and village community too. It was a fairly small village, so it was accessible in that way, manageable. The most striking result was a reduction by half of our NHS prescribing costs per head, compared with local and national averages, as monitored by something introduced in the 70s called the Pact Scheme. And Jackie's going to show you a slide about that. A half is an astounding figure. At the time that I was doing this, you'll see 40.9%, 49% somewhere in there. There you are on the right hand, 49.3%. That's the figure I'm talking about. That excludes nutrients, some of which were prescribable at the time. I became quite expert in what I could wangle through the NHS. At the time, people were getting prizes for reducing their prescribing by 10%, and they were making a huge effort. I didn't make any effort at all. It just went down because people found a better alternative. I believe these benefits are available to everyone, and I believe I know why. I do not have time this evening to set out the physics underlying my belief, but will be happy to respond to any requests for more detail. Instead, I will declare some assumptions and work through them. Living things are not defined by their chemical ingredients, otherwise we'd enjoy the pile of nutrient constituents as well as the cabbage. But their structure and growth energy are an integral part of the meal. These form a qualitative overlay on the quantities that we are so familiar with, turning nutrients into tissues and movement, thoughts and feelings, graceful relationships within an ecosphere. These qualities are irreducible. They have to be lived personally and cannot be quantified at any price. It is completely futile to try. The structure of all things that live or have ever lived and the relationships on the earth are encoded into space as something called scalar fields. It's a physical phenomenon. It's understood by physicists and mathematicians. More on that if you want. Rupert Sheldrake, of whom you may have heard, calls them fields of formative causation, or else morphogenetic fields. These fields are what inform DNA what kind of cell to build for its function in the place it is in the organism, or in the organ in the organism. Provided the organism can keep up with the pace and intricacy of its formative field, It has access to the boundless energy packed in the vacuum alongside it, transforming and radiating it as vitality. So we're talking about two physical properties which are recognized by physicists, although they find them embarrassing, which is a huge 0-point energy and a massive capacity for information coding in the vacuum of space. Quite apart from your instinctive awareness of your own and other people's vitality, or the lack of it, I have a thought experiment for you, and I shall want a show of hands shortly, so be prepared with your button. Suppose I take two of your, by the way, Jackie, thank you, I'm not looking at, oh yes, great. Suppose I take two of your excellent organic potatoes of similar size, dug from the same ridge. I bake them both on Saturday and serve you one with a knob of Welsh butter straight from the oven. The other cools, spends the night in the fridge and is reheated for your lunch on Sunday with another knob of Welsh butter. Which one tastes better? Can we have a show of hands for Saturday? I can't see the show of hands, but I'm assuming you've been quick on the buttons. So if you'd like to go away, please, and can we have a show of hands for Sunday? So, Jackie or somebody, can you see what the result was? It may be I've been asking too much.
I am sorry, Peter, to interrupt. It's Sarah Kernahan speaking here. I think there's a problem with while the screen is being shared, it's really hard for people.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
To show that.
Okay, that's something learnt about Zoom tonight. Anyway, most people prefer Saturday for depth of flavour and satisfaction. Both potatoes, remember, have the same nutrient content and the same structure, but the one you eat on Saturday still has most of its vitality. That is, though it is beginning to bleed away rapidly after the cooking. Sundays has lost it all. I left out of our experiment your neighbour's chemically grown potato, but that would have had much less vitality in the first place. The biocides he uses and the chemical fertilizers with which he tries to make up for his depleted soil hamper the plant's growth so that it does not achieve anything like the intricate structure intended, or lags behind the program, as it were, that it's copying. Consequently, it radiates far less vitality, often a feeble threadbare remnant. Now, you've been looking at a puzzling slide for the last few minutes, and it's out of a book by Harry Oldfield, which dates back about 30 years, but shows his experiments with something called Kirlian photography. And basically, in my opinion, Kirlian photography makes visible the radiation of vitality around living things. And you can do it with potatoes, oranges, anything you like. These four pictures, I did some experiments myself on organic versus non-organic, but I can't find the blooming things. What you're looking at in the top left, the green is a junk food subject on the left. It's fingerprints that they take it's a handprint actually. And on the right, you've got a whole food subject. And you can see that one has absolutely no vitality and the other one has quite a bit, though by no means as good as it can be. It's a bit threadbare. The pink one below it shows you the difference between the Kirlian field of muesli on the left and cornflakes on the right. I've always maintained you're better off eating the box. There's more nutrient in the cardboard. And then the other two, I shouldn't really take time over anymore. Thank you, Becky, for that one. This vitality is both the defining quality of life and the chief distinction of produce grown organically or biodynamically. It's massively larger on organically grown produce of similar type. The repeated cycles of growth motivated by this sparkling energy also create perfect tissue that has excellent structural integrity, great resistance to injury and encroachment, which we now know, of course, as infection or infestation. This blesses not only the food organism, but its consumer. The act of chewing releases the vitality and structural information from live or freshly cooked food, which then irradiates the organs close to the mouth. the brainstem, hypothalamus, pituitary, and thyroid. And with a bit of luck, you're looking at a picture of that. I've got myself in a pickle about the size of the print. There we are. The radiation is captured and channeled into vitality for the consumer. And that is why you experience a depth of flavor when chewing really flavoursome food. And of course, the flavour is the vitality of the organic produce that Anne was talking about earlier. That was a wonderful serendipity between our two presentations, and we haven't conferred about it at all. Structural information of vitality can also be used as medicaments. In homeopathic pharmacy, materials mostly from living things are diluted serially and splashed around vigorously, which must isolate the qualities of the material from whilst washing away its quantities. It also reverses the character of the action, which is unexpected, but it's true. Homeopathy certainly works, and at least 3 systematic scientific reviews of randomized placebo-controlled trials in humans have demonstrated this quite convincingly. And you're probably looking at a slide now of one of the title pages, yes. Conventional institutions are in denial of this, I'm afraid, and have spent a lot of effort trying to discredit these findings, but they keep coming. I can't speak for animals, but at least they do not kid themselves. Sorry. My conclusion is that what protects me and my nearest relatives is near exclusive reliance on organically grown fresh produce, eaten still live or recently cooked, and chewed well. Fresh air, pure and energized water, wholesome society, meaningful occupations, and music, and so on, all contribute, of course. But food and drink are the staple determinants of health. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Peter. That was excellent in that not only just, Peter, you're on the presentation yourself, but how it brings all the things that the other 3 speakers said, brings them together and marries the themes together. And just a comment, if I may, that for people who, for the participants who may not realise, the science that Peter Mansfield's just outlined may seem to some to be kind of off-the-wall alternative stuff, but actually it's not. And as we've moved forward, the approaches to physics, for example, are demonstrating that things that the alternative movement held were important, and the methods that were developed decades and decades ago are actually now are sound and beginning to and are beginning to fit together. I know, for example, that the crystallization method, which is another picture method alongside, as well as Kirlian photography, has been developed as a method. It now has an ISBN number and shows differences between different production methods. The fact it's got an ISBN number means it's repeatable. It can be replicated according to the right kinds of protocols and so on. So it's real. The effects that they're showing are real, and we might not have the full explanation as to what's going on, but these things are going on. And actually, Peter's offered the explanation in terms of structural energy, the self-regulating, self-organizing abilities of organisms to work, and the explanation that this in some way might well be a key to the transference of qualities of health is very interesting. And I think this is the kind of thing that whole health agriculture is trying to develop, because we want to look at these mechanisms and see how we can encourage farmers or create best practice to develop these kinds of methods. So we have some time for questions and discussions. We've got a couple of questions, I think, in the chat. I'm not sure how many. One I picked up earlier was a question about Annie, whether you're creating the microorganisms for yourself, or how are you managing them, or what you're doing. I think this related to the question about the microorganisms generated through composting.
Yeah, I think I possibly was gabbling at that point. We don't currently add microorganisms to make compost. What I meant was that the ones that live in the compost, that are formed in the composting process, they're the ones that go into the soil. And there's a specific pattern of microbe generation brought about by the composting method. So the first phase of the composting heats the compost and kills pathogens. And then what's left are the thermophilic organisms, which then breed up as the compost cools down. And those are the ones that go into the soil and which we want to breed up. In the early days, before we were so used to making this kind of compost, we did use a starter, which is like a powder and which is a concentrate of introduced microorganisms. They were very expensive. They came from Holland. We certainly made very good compost with this starter. But I'm no longer convinced it's such a brilliant idea. I feel intuitively that you're better off with microorganisms that are site-specific. They're to do with where we live. So we make compost on the same site, and a little bit is always going to be left on the ground, and they inoculate the next row. And I don't have any proof of this, but I feel happier doing that, really. So in answer to your question, no, we didn't add external microorganisms to our mix. They're what were created in the composting process.
Thanks, Anne. There was a specific question for Peter Mansfield in terms of, Peter, what did you mean by live food? Are you talking about raw fruit and veg, or is that broader?
It's a very good question, because it is a bit broader. As far as vegetation is concerned, it does have to be raw at least, but it also needs to be fresh and not chilled in a warehouse or something like that. Some cabbages and fruit are kept looking pretty fresh, but have had time to bleed away quite a lot of their vitality over the months they've been stored. And for obvious commercial reasons, that's a very attractive thing to do. But from your point of view, the thing to do is to stay with food fresh in season as far as possible, or sprout things out of season, which everybody can do in jars on windowsill or in the kitchen. So one of the things I would recommend, for example, is that when you're eating Brussels sprouts in the season, you take the whole plant out and stick it in a bucket outside the door and let it continue to grow, because growth is the key. If you're growing, you are radiating. And things like potatoes, that's to say, tubers and roots and so forth, which are intended in nature to grow again the following year, biennial plants. Those stores are dormant, but they are alive. So a carrot that hasn't been irradiated or messed with or chopped up months ago and put in a tin, carrots are alive when you start to prepare to cook them. And the same applies to fruit, but it does wane gradually. As the texture of the fruit wanes, you begin to feel it going a bit soggy, and you know that it's not quite as vibrant as it was when it was first picked.
Thank you. There's a question from Louise at Grower Granary asking about reading on glyphosate science. We'll post something on the Whole Health Organic Agriculture website about reading on glyphosate science in the next few days. But one thing that I would just like to say about this is that a number of studies on pesticide residues in food show, if you look at the analysis of pesticide residues in food, in the UK, as opposed to the US and on crops like maize and soya, glyphosate residues in food are relatively low. And according to the conventional wisdom, the residues are far too low to have any impact. They're well below the threshold level for under minimum residue levels and so on. But it misunderstands completely the effects, the impacts on cocktail mixtures, or what indeed is happening at low levels. And there's a whole range of science coming out on a range of pesticides at low levels. And there's one paper that I'll put on the website relating to that. And also impacts relating to the endocrine disruption levels of pesticides like glyphosate, which are not tested for at all. And neither, by the way, when we talk about glyphosate, nobody sprays glyphosate. No one sprays glyphosate. People spray Roundup or another glyphosate-based formulation. And there's plenty of literature that show the adjuvants and the synergists within the pesticides are very damaging, not been tested, never taken into account, and are disruptors of the system. And I think this is one of the points that I'd like to just go into further about what is the system and what we can do to enhance it and avoid disruption. Can I come back to Sally and Gary, who, Sally, you mentioned in the film, not in passing, but you mentioned in the film that you started using homeopathy before you converted to organic. Can you just say a bit more about that? Particularly, was it the use of homeopathy? You were a conventional farmer at this point and successfully using farm homeopathy, but did the use of homeopathy lead you into an organic conversion, or was it something else?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, well, I think I came into homeopathy first. I always wanted to be organic, but never thought down here we've only got such a small depth of soil. So basically we thought we could never be organic down here, but learning about it, you build your soils. So we're building our soils now, and yes, I think how can I say this? I don't know, but yes, I've lost my track here. Yeah,
I think the homeopathy is important for whether you're conventional or organic. Then it's not a question of you have to be organic to use homeopathy. It's more that the organic approach is like the whole picture, the big picture there. But no, I mean the use of homeopathy as far as stock health and things like that there was a big uplift in stock health and things like that, even when we were conventionally farming. It wasn't really the driver to go organic, but we were doing so many things that weren't the norm, if you see what I mean, conventional farming practices, that we thought we might as well just take the whole step and go organic and, you know, complete the whole picture then, if that makes sense. Is that what you're getting at? Or?
Yeah, it was. I mean, basically, what I was wanting to explore, and I'm going to ask Anne this question in a second, is that now you're in an organic system. You've got a system basis. You've got a kind of rotation. You are using herbal lays. You've got a systematic approach to how you're managing the farm. Therefore, how important is that? The most important thing you see, all the things that I would say maybe tweaking the system, like homeopathy, like the bugs, you know, the good bugs in the water and stuff like that. You've got a basic system. How does that fit with the tweaks? Which do you see as most kind of important, or are they all important?
I think they're all important, but since we've gone organic, we've opened our eyes, and like now our latest thing, which Anne was talking about, is composting. Well, we've gone into anaerobic composting with EM1 bugs, and that has opened up a completely new avenue for us now, and we're really excited about that. So yeah, we seem to keep following on to something that's opening our eyes all the time and leading us down this track, which is making our farm healthier and more productive. My aim is to get back to be able to produce off our land as the same as we were conventionally, or even more, is what I'm hoping. And I think we are on the right track now. and it's quite exciting, I find. And yeah, we're learning such a lot as we go. So I think homeopathy is very important, but the soil, learning about the soil is so exciting, and I think it's so important that our soil is healthy. And if we can get the bugs in the soil, I think we'll win, I think.
Okay, that's great. I'd love to go into that further, but I'm not sure we have time. There was another question specifically to Sally Bell about the issue relating to getting the message out to other GPs, and also getting the message out to, well, the question is it uphill convincing your patients, Dr. Bell, to get the behavioural change your advice assumes, particularly to those in food poverty?
I think there's a couple of things. One, I see really sick patients, and when I put them on my programs, they get better. And that feeling of feeling better is the thing that keeps them on the program, really. They fall in love with feeling great. I have a harder time convincing people who have diseases that don't affect them emotionally, or fatigue or pain, to stick with it. Although if I can do more advanced testing to show the improvement that what they're doing is helping, that can work. And the thing is, I stepped out of normal general practice because I could not do what I'm doing in 10 minutes. Like, you cannot medicate lifestyle issues, and lifestyle changes takes time. I work with a health coach. I spend an hour with my patients. I get to the bottom of what is wrong with them. We personalize their nutrition. We personalize it for their family, for their income, and then they work with a health coach. I think accessibility to fresh food is a huge issue for those in poverty. I've worked as an inner city GP most of my life. But there's also the issue of not knowing how to cook. There's also the issue that people don't eat together anymore. So there are issues around that. Now, regarding my colleagues, I would like to say that 50% of my patients are medics. So it just goes to show how they don't believe in the system anymore. And I think there is an awakening within general practice. You can now do lifestyle medicine diplomas. We know that it's not working. We know the futility of medicating everything. But that complete transition is going to take time. In terms of the public health messages, most of them are rubbish. Like, they are just founded on old science, and they are not worth the paper that they're written on. I'm sorry. The only thing that possibly they do any good at is that we should be eating more vegetables and plants. But even, as Anne said, 5 fruit and vegetables a day is bare minimum. We need way more than that in order to bring us back from that brink of disease. So, and that's why I just don't think we can look to the institutions for our health messages. And that's why, you know, we need people like you guys, and getting a clear message out there that there are alternative ways. But people love what I do because they feel better. So,
thanks,
yeah.
Sally. Peter Mansfield, you are a great student of the Pioneer Health Centre, the Peckham experiment. As I recall, well, as I know, the Pioneer Health Centre, which worked as in general practice, if you like, prior to the NHS, in Southeast London, but was linked to an organic farm. So they had the things you would expect in a general practice, but they also were concerned about food, and they had links to an organic farm. And you, I know, Peter, have been way ahead of the game in terms of expanding your practice, initially your general practice, to bring in education about food and education about cooking and so on. How do you see this? I mean, it seems from the outside huge challenges, but how have you got any thoughts about how farmers who farm for health can make connections and link to doctors, to general practitioners? How do we bring these different strands together?
Well, that's a huge question. As far as medical training is concerned, it has to be severed from the umbilical cord to pharmaceutical companies. Doctors are taught what is good for pharmaceutical companies, basically.
Yeah.
And that is not an easy matter. I started, one of the reasons I gave up an academic career was I proposed a course on health and disease and proposed 6 dichotomies for seminar discussion, and every department in the medical school wanted to have it under its wing. It didn't know anything about it, but it thought it was a good idea. Oh yes, we'll have that. And they were fighting like titans. And I was the rowing boat in between the Ark Royal and some other. So basically I got out of it because I wasn't going to survive. And also because it was complete misconception. I think medicine is good at what medicine does, which is crisis medicine, generally speaking. It's not good at chronic things at all. And we need 2 separate services. We need a health cultivation or health promotion service, a health creation, whatever you want to call it, but we have to distinguish it from the thing which has become associated with health, which actually we mean medicine or disease. So the NHS is not a health service, it's a disease service, and we need a disease service, but it doesn't have to be anything like that big, like about a quarter of its present size, if we can be bothered to train up and institute a health service, which would be probably based on a call center or something like that, stacks of information, very different information, to help people to be confident and competent in managing their own lives, as independent as possible from doctors. And that is how we would break this indefinite, unsustainable growth in demand for medical care. Most of that demand is crying for the moon. The medicine doesn't have it to offer, but we don't know that yet. We need to be told.
Okay, thank you very much. I notice we're in the last minute, so I should be drawing this to a close. We have a number of questions on the chat, which we'll catch, and we will post links to all our speakers and some further information, as said about the glyphosate, but there's quite a few pieces of information we've gathered already on the Whole Health Agriculture website about things like microorganisms, the whole theory of plants in terms of the role of plants in stimulating immune systems, the idea of a theory called old friends, microorganisms, which are basically bacterial microorganisms that have been around on this planet as long as humans have and linked together. There's some kind of symbiotic relationship. So we'll post all these kinds of things together. I just want to finish then by thanking everybody, thanking all the speakers. It's been a brilliant, stimulating session. Thank you, Jane, and your colleagues for allowing us to look at the Whole Health Agriculture website. Our goal in Whole Health Agriculture is actually to explore these areas, to bring farmers together in farming for health, and to bring consumers, because there's an education process, and I don't like the term consumers, I think we should use the word citizens, to bring citizens together and to bring the medical profession together in a whole new ball game, a whole new model, a different way of looking at it. Health, however much people say they're interested in health or whatever, they're not. When we have no real working concept anywhere on the agricultural policy agenda or in terms of the forefront of agricultural practice that is about holistic and whole health. Whole Health Agriculture is aiming to change all that. So thank you very much for listening to us, and have a look at our website. Thanks very much. Good night.